Should we do it?
Yeah. Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed, Mr. Universe, with our kitchen table astronomy here. Many people this Monday are tired because we decided as a nation once again to sacrifice an hour of sleep for an hour of sunshine. Daylight savings time has begun. I admit I was thrilled to see the sun out at 7 o'clock last night, and I can deal with a lot less sleep than people as I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning for 17 years. But there's a time zone change on the moon proposed as well.
Right, because people on the moon get so much sleep, because they are lunatics.
Because it's nighttime there all the time,
yeah,
right?
Yes. No, so this is actually a really interesting problem. What time would be on the moon? And you would think, hey, wait a minute, I haven't thought about it.
Right.
Well, that's exactly right. And so, but now, this past November, European Space Agency, NASA, and a bunch of other space agencies got together to figure out how should we standardize time on the moon. So we don't know how it's going to go, but there is a real challenge to do that, and that's what they are trying to determine. So the problem is fascinating.
Well, why is it a problem? Why do we care if there's time, what time it is on the moon? How does that help with astronomy, with space travel, with anything those?
So there are a couple of things with that. One is time flows differently on the moon.
And this is what's crazy. I mean, people, I think, know this generally. But even on our own planet, if you are up on the top of a mountain, time flows differently in a higher elevation than it does closer to sea level. That's crazy.
That's right. And so normally, I mean, of course, you need to have instruments that can measure that, right? I mean, if you don't have instruments to measure seconds that precisely, you won't know that.
Right.
But we do. Not just that we have instruments that can measure time precisely, but that precision is now necessary, for example, for navigation. Mm-hmm. And this is the problem that we are going to face on the moon. So this is just one problem, and we'll come back to it in 1 second. The other thing is, so far, I mean, because people have been to the moon, sorry to disappoint, yes. We did.
Sorry, QAnon.
Yeah, exactly. We did go to the moon, and there are other missions that have been going over there too. So they have been using time, but the way they have been using it is with respect to the Earth. So they would have their own time measuring instruments, for example, in the spacecraft, and it's going to bounce off signals from radio transmitters here on Earth to synchronize it. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that works if there are few spacecrafts, or you're the only one, for example, Buzz Aldrin or whatever, they are going, that is okay.
Yeah.
The problem is now there already are multiple spacecrafts orbiting, or there are down there, and in the next couple of years, there's going to be a traffic jam over there. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just about what time you are keeping, it's also about what time others are keeping, not to mention once you have landers on the ground, they are communicating with the spacecraft that are orbiting and so on and so forth. So that is the challenge that they have, and that leads to some fascinating problems of what time should we use.
Is the moon going to be one time zone? It's 3 hours earlier right now in California, on the other side of our own country. What are they going to do with a moon, a moon-sized moon? Is it small enough to sustain one time zone? Is that the best way to do it for space travel? Or do they not even know yet?
We don't know, because it's also possible that there are some of the ideas. One is that we actually synchronize it. Everybody agrees on that we are going to synchronize it based upon the Earth, mm-hmm. right? And of course, there are problems with that because, as I mentioned, the clocks or the second would go a little bit faster on the moon because it has slightly less gravity.
Because the space-time continuum, the fabric of space and time, has everything to do with gravity. I would love to just delve into this really deeply, but you've explained this to me in years past so amazingly that if space-time is a fabric and it's a cloth, and you have a little bit of gravity like a golf ball, it'll put a little dent in that cloth. But if you put a bowling ball in it, it will put a huge dent in that cloth, and that affects the way time moves. Time is not one thing. Time is, read Carlo Rovelli's The Order of Time. It's like pop, space-time continuum, astrophysics. It's beautifully written and wonderful and will blow your mind.
Right, and so it's not about simply the issue of, hey, you can just sort of change the clock. No, time is physically different. And so what they estimate is that the day would be about 56 millionth of a second. The clock with 24 hours would go a little bit faster on the moon compared to the Earth. So every day after 24-hour period, you are going to lose, compared to the Earth, there's going to be a difference of 56 millionth of a second, or 56 microseconds.
So then, in 56 million years, our clocks will be off by 1 second.
Right,
that doesn't sound like it matters a whole lot.
But this already would be a problem in terms of navigation, in terms of computers and things like that. By the way, our own satellites, they also have to take that into account between, for example, geosynchronous orbit, which is far out 22,000 miles up, versus on the ground. So we actually have to take general theory of relativity into account. So again, somebody says, hey, how do we know Einstein was right? Well, if you use GPS, the global positioning system, that's how we know. I mean, we know other ways too.
Because this whole theory came from Einstein, has been proven time and time again about the closer you are to a source of gravity, the slower time moves, right? And the faster, the further away.
Right. Right. But here is the thing. On Earth, we have all agreed, it's called Universal Coordinated Time, or UTC, Coordinated Universal Time, however you want to do it. That is in Paris. There is a standard of time. Everybody actually goes and measures it with that. This is not GMT, right? Greenwich Mean Time. That is the time zone. And then
that's the time they always use on the BBC radio hour.
Right, exactly. But then you have UTC, which is what is the unit of time. And everybody has to agree on, and on Earth we do. We need to have the same thing on the moon and then figure out what kind of time zone we are going to use. But here is, to me, one of the more fascinating things is that on the moon, and I think you referred to it about a few minutes ago, a day is 29 and a half days long, Earth days. And so, okay, so if we go by noon to noon, like the way we do it here on Earth, well, that's going to be a long time. And the problem is that if you have astronauts, and I'm assuming we'll have astronauts, but we live on this 24-hour, evolutionary-wise, we are trained in terms of 24-hour rhythms. And so how do we match up with those things? And I think that's a really fascinating problem.
Yeah, one long 29-day long day, you could get so much more done.
Exactly. and you will be younger, you know?
Because time will be moving more slowly for you as more time transpires on Earth. You won't perceive it in the same way, right?
From with respect to the Earth, but also sort of like, because your 1 day is 29 and a half days, Earth days. But so those are all the questions that people are figuring it out. And because China is planning on going, I just read that they have just sort of like, shown a picture of their big rocket booster, which is going to be the bigger than Starship, like, the one that SpaceX is making, that's bigger than Artemis rockets and stuff like that. So it's still in its early stages. So China is definitely planning on going to the moon in the next decade or less. And certainly Artemis 2, the second launch of Artemis to go around the moon, that's going to happen next year in 2024, with potential landing on the moon in the coming years after that. So we are already seeing a lot of activity on the moon. And in order to have these kind of things without incident, and also in order for spacecrafts to communicate themselves, so they don't always have to synchronize it with Earth. They will have to work it over there. That is what the moon time issue is. And a European Space Agency has a plan right now in which they are trying to have these 4 satellites that is going to communicate with the lander. They are trying to build that up on the moon, not on Earth. This is about the moon.
What time will it be on the dark side of the moon all the time?
That would be about like Pink Floyd. It's always Pink Floyd time.
They do have that song Time on Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh my goodness, it's all coming together.
Mr. Universe, before I let you go, Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed and Amherst Cinema board member, were you disappointed that Everything Everywhere All at Once cleaned everybody's clock at the Oscars last night?
No, I'm actually really happy, and also look. I didn't think it was a bad movie. I just thought it was fine,
Yeah.
and I think it was great in terms of diversity. I mean, I think that pretty much balanced out, like maybe like last 100 years.
I don't think it went that far. Maybe the last 3.
So no, it was. I think it was great. I loved the acceptance speeches.
Yeah.
But my favorite one, I know I'm going in a different direction, was the acceptance speech by the best song for the Oscars.
Oh my God.
Naatu Naatu, because he brought in yours and mine favorite, like Karen Carpenter.
Oh my God. That movie is my second favorite movie of the year, RRR, and that song is pure joy.
Again, I'm not gonna say too much about the movie because again we'll get upset about it. But
I loved
the
it.
song, unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was like even at the Oscars when it was happening, it was just like there was a completely different level of energy.
Yeah.
And I should mention for people who don't know that Carpenters, and we talked about it, there is one song about
Calling occupants of interplanetary most extraordinary craft.
wow, nice one, because that is about like
Talking to aliens.
welcoming the aliens, and so that was, and I hope you'll provide a link to that too, because
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a.
That's a great song.
Well, again, I won't go that far, but it's a song,
Yeah.
and it's about aliens, so that's actually great. But I thought the acceptance speeches were amazing. I love the fact that Brendan Fraser won.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I love movies,
Comeback story.
comeback stories, but also
Ki
love
Hui
this-
Kwan is also himself a bundle of pure joy that
That's
we should
it.
all be drawing from right now.
and Jamie Lee Curtis. I mean, I think her acceptance speech was perfect because she really talked about sort of like everybody else.
Yeah.
And I thought that was quite amazing.
Right.
So, yeah, well, I think it was worth staying up, and Jimmy Kimmel was funny.
I thought he was really funny.
I think that worked too. So, yeah, no, I think it went well. And I don't begrudge anything, even though Tar was a better film. But that's not the point of academies. Lawrence of Arabia never won the Oscar. That doesn't make it a bad film. Citizen Kane didn't win, so that's okay.